All right, today I am with my good friend Montell Fish, and we are talking about when should Christians get married, how do you know if the person you're talking to is the one, and a couple other things I've learned as someone who's been married for 11 years and also an entrepreneur creative. So stay tuned. What's going on? This is Ruslan with KingsDreamENT.com. This channel exists to encourage, empower, inspire you to live out God's dream. This is like our 5th or 6th time starting this video. It keeps crashing, but we're believing that the stuff we're going to talk about is going to help some of you guys. Basically, my good friend Montell Fish is in town. What's up, bro? How you doing?
Chilling. How are you, bro?
This is working. I'm happy that this is working. I'm happy that you're here. You came and hung out with me today, yesterday actually, last night. Yeah. And you went to the gym, and I'm force feeding you healthy food that you don't want to eat.
No, not at all.
Montell's in rebellion, ladies and gentlemen.
Sure.
But we had this really cool conversation, man, about marriage, about some things you're kind of working through personally that we're going to get into, and something that I think you believe that a lot of people are kind of wrestling through, younger believers, based on the video you just did on your YouTube channel about when will you find your wife? When will God reveal who your wife is? And so I was like, man, instead of just doing another video, you've been on my channel multiple times. You actually one of the first people to hop on here and do an interview, you and Chaz. So I'm grateful for you guys. I thought, dude, let's talk about this idea of marriage, of being an entrepreneur, the tension that many people face and wanting to pursue their dreams, yet settle down. And I just thought it'd be super cool, man. So just kind of tell me where you're at with this whole thing.
Yeah, man. Well, so I released a video. The video is called "She Will Come When It's Time," and basically
very spiritual.
Yeah, it's definitely super spiritual. No, but it was actually inspired by something. Well, one, it was like straight, like I think the whole thing was God on how it came about, because I heard my pastor, like, literally just in the middle of Bible study, he was just like, he just basically encouraged me that she was come when it's time. Like, pastors just be knowing stuff sometimes, and he just knew that. I don't know how he knew.
And he just said that to you?
Just in the middle of Bible study. And then, because, yeah, he was just encouraging me that, like, I don't need to worry about that stuff.
Right.
But at the same time, I was going through, and still I'm kind of working some things out with special person and
special somebody.
Yeah, but just trying to figure out, like, okay, what is God's voice in all this thing? Like, what is he saying? Like, even the things on, like, will God say that this person is a one, or will you kind of just figure it out? Like, everyone usually has a different story on it, and so it's kind of hard to be like, this is the exact way God's gonna do it, which can be like, oh, okay, God. But yeah, so we talked about that last night, and I think it could benefit some people if we chat about it today. So
yeah, I mean, let's talk about a few things that Scripture says, right? Because I think that's important. Those of us that are in Christ Jesus, we hold the Bible as the final authority over human conduct and good decisions and bad decisions, and those things, ways you can honor God, ways you could sin against God. And Scripture in the beginning says that it is not good for man to be alone, right? That God created Adam, and then he created Eve because it wasn't good for man to be alone. So one, I think that's important, that we are designed to not be alone. We're designed to be in community. We're designed to be fruitful and multiply, right?
Right.
And how literal some people want to take it. You know what I'm saying? Some people was like, yo, I want 4 kids. My pastor has 7 kids, you know. And then there's also, there's a lot in there about marriage and, you know, how to, you know, Proverbs 31, having a wife that is of noble character. That's one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, I think. And then there's some stuff in the New Testament where Jesus obviously is, you know, encourages people to get married. Right. But then there's Paul in the New Testament, and one of the verses in Corinthians, I think it's in Corinthians, Paul says, you know, if you're burning with lust, get married. But I wish that you guys would all be like me, right? Because then that way you can kind of focus. It's like Corinthians 7, you kind of focus give all yourself to God, right? And the question on who Paul was, whether he was married or not married, the question on was he widowed. There's a lot of debate amongst that in terms of scholars. One of the biggest things I think many people end up missing when reading scripture is the cultural context of what was going on, right? So what's happening in terms of Christians being persecuted under the Roman Empire, right? In terms of a lot of folks being martyred at that time. So we have to factor in what's the social tension of being a Christian. And why would he tell them not to get married, or like, I wish you would remain like me because you can get it. Well, when you get married, your life gets complicated. You gain responsibility, right? And so I think from a cultural, social standpoint, I think what he was saying was not just on some like, yo, don't get married because that's the ideal thing to serve God. I think he's actually saying, hey, under this current climate, it's probably not a good idea because someone might get martyred. You're going to have to be a single parent. It's going to be messy. You know? I'm not saying that's what he's saying. I'm saying that's what I think he may have been meaning by that passage, because I don't want to infer my opinion on scripture. And so all in all, man, I think marriage is a beautiful thing. Right. I think the tension that a lot of people are facing is when to get married. How does that look? No, for sure. You know, you are, how old are you?
I'm 22.
22. Yeah. So I was 23 when I got married.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah, I'll be 35 next month, New Year's Eve. I don't have my birthday anywhere public, and I don't like the random like shout outs on the birthday. You know, Facebook reminders, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I'll be 35 this year on New Year's Eve, and I've been married 23, so it'll be 12 years this July. Man, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and congrats. I definitely didn't do it right. Go quote unquote right. You know what I'm saying? We were
get to the good stuff. Yeah.
We were. I was 19. My wife was 17 when we met. Okay. We dated for 4 years. I mean, we did it right in the sense that like we didn't have sexual intercourse. You know what I'm saying? That's probably the only thing right that we did. You know, or the only right thing that I did. Right. But we got married young. I was not financially independent. I was not responsible. I was not making money. I was just not in the best spot. Right. I knew that I didn't want to burn with lust, like Paul said, and I knew that she was my wife. I knew that my wife was my wife from the very first real conversation we had. Wow. One of the few times I feel like God spoke to me and was like, this is your wife. Or maybe it might have just been me. You know what I'm saying? We met at a Starbucks. Neither one of us drank coffee at the time. You know and I remember that first conversation and like, yo, this is my wife. This is the one, you know? Dang. And so we were young and we made a lot of, in terms of the way we got married, like I ended up living the first 9 months. I had a condo with my mom that I co-signed for, that I shouldn't have co-signed for. And we ended up living in the top story of that condo. Oh my. Horrible decision. Sheesh, yeah. And then we finally moved out about 11 months into our marriage, 10 months into our marriage, we finally moved out. And I remember people asking me like, how are you going to provide for your wife? How are you going to do these things? You know, and I was like still in college and trying to do music. And this is before the internet really took over. This is 2008 is when I got married. Wow, yeah. And yeah, man, and it was rough. Like it was rough. But what marriage did for me is that joint definitely grew me up. Like it forced me to man up. It forced me to be responsible. It forced me to figure out how to hustle and make more money. Yeah. And then fatherhood just amplified that even more. Man. And so the very thing that I thought was going to slow me down on my dreams is the thing that actually empowered me to go after my dreams, which was my wife, marriage. Not that my wife, I didn't think my wife was going to slow me down. I thought the idea of marriage being this responsibility thing that you got to die to your desires, which you do in a lot of ways. But it was the very thing that propelled me to become full-time. And my wife was the one who told me to quit my job. Wow. And she was a stay-at-home mom. And my wife has always just believed and had faith in me. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, man, that's kind of like in a nutshell my experience. And
well, that's interesting because it's like, okay, so you have the situation. Let's say two people don't agree. Let's say you're like...
Hypothetically,
of course. But let's say these people don't agree. And one's like, yeah, I'm going to be full-time artist. I'm just going to go for it, like send it. Yeah. And the other person is like, let's get realistic. It's not really making that much money. Maybe you should do this for now until like things start happening more. And then it's like there's obviously that tension because you're just like, dang, my passion is burning inside of me and I want to go do this thing that I feel like God's called me to do. Right. Another person is just like realistic. And then there's an aspect of Abraham and Sarah when God gave Abraham the promise, right, of Isaac and how old that they would have them. And Abraham, to my understanding, was pretty down. Like he trusted God, and Sarah laughed and she didn't think it was possible at all. So there was like that, but obviously they still got along. But your case is kind of just like a blessing in the sense of your wife is just fully supporting. So it's what do you think about that when two people necessarily don't agree? And do you think that the man should do what he feels like God is calling him to do anyway, or he should some way lay down what he feels like he should do to a sense lay down your life for the woman? But how far does that go?
That's a great question. I've seen and I've done all the above. I've had a job, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like I got married and went full-time with music. Like, I worked, you know what I'm saying? I went full-time in 2015. So up until 2015, I worked a job. You know what I mean? Jeez. And so I think it's both. I think it's both. There's a proverb that says, those who, I just did a video on this on TikTok. Those who tend to their land will always have abundance of food, but those who chase fantasies are foolish. I might be paraphrasing. I'll look that up. And that was the verse that really snapped me into place in terms of like, do I want to do music as a career or do I not? You know what I'm saying? Because if I do, then my behavior and the way I approach music has to be approached like a business. It can't be approached like some willy-nilly hobby where I'm kind of doing it, but I'm kind of not doing it, and I'm not really paying attention to the numbers because I'm not a numbers guy. I'm a creative after all. I'm an artist, right? These are all the things I told myself.
For sure.
And hearing that verse, we got married in 2008, and we had a ton of debt, student loan debt, car debt, credit card debt. And in the process, we discovered Crown Financial at our church. That didn't really do a whole lot for us. And then we discovered Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. And so we ended up going on this journey to pay off all of our debt, which is about $45,000 of debt in 18 months. But best decision we could have ever made.
That's sweet.
And so not only did that teach me financial literacy, that teach me about entrepreneurship. I read his book on entrepreneurship, and I would listen to his podcast every day. And he read that verse. He read that verse on his radio show. And I remember it was like 2010, we were right in the middle of the debt-free journey, and I was like, I really had to soberly ask myself, like, am I a creative entrepreneur or is this a fantasy? Because if I'm an entrepreneur, I have to approach this as an entrepreneur would. And that was the really kind of the beginning, 2010. I had made a little bit of money off of music before then, but that was really when I was like, all right, well, what are the revenue streams? Where can I make money? Okay, I know I have to do shows. I know I have to do merch. I know I have to do features. I know I have to do, right? I have to, and I discovered sync licensing, which me and you have talked about. And I talk about it on this channel a lot. Shout out to MusicBed. And so once I discovered the revenue streams, then I just had to implement them. So there was this weird situation that happened. So I told you earlier I co-signed on a condo with my mom, right? Terrible decision. Everything about that was just not wise on my part. And unfortunately, I was the one that kind of like pursued it. Long story short, I co-signed on a condo. The condo, I had moved out. We got married, moved out. Condo goes into foreclosure. The foreclosure HOA fees were like $1,500 that she didn't pay for like a year that she stayed there in HOA fees. Those were attached to my credit. So in the process of getting debt free, I end up getting sued, but they had my name misspelled and they didn't have my social. So I kind of brushed it off. It was $1,500 in HOA fees. That $1,500 turned into $5,000 with all the court fees and all the adjustments. And we wake up one day and our accounts are levied, which means that we had just paid rent, thankfully. So this is like, I'm in college, we're working crap jobs, and my wife is off to work, and she calls me, and she's like, hey, all the money out of our account is gone. And I was like, what do you mean?
Oh my God.
And so I looked, and like everything was gone. Thankfully, we just paid rent. And that was like, we were like baby step one. We had just paid off $1,000.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we had just saved $1,000 and we had a couple credit cards we had knocked out. So I was like, yo, what am I gonna do?
Right.
And I was really like considering bankruptcy.
Man.
Because in the process of figuring this out, I discovered that second mortgage that I told you about. That second mortgage was $60,000 that I was liable for. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And because the first mortgage in a foreclosure, you're not liable for. The second mortgage, you are liable for. So that second mortgage that I had to pay for that. So long story short, I ended up doing a feature sale. For the first time ever, I did a feature sale because I knew one of the revenue streams as an artist was doing a feature sale.
All right.
And I threw it up on like Twitter at the time. This is 2011, somewhere in that ballpark, 2010, 2011, did a feature sale. And bro, within a week, I had made like $3,500 off of features.
Sheesh.
Anywhere from a couple $100 to like, I don't know, I think the most I got at the time was like 600 or 700 for 2 verses. And I made like $3,500 in a week.
Wow.
So that thing that was a curse, that thing that was a poor decision that then I had to pay for the consequence of, ended up turning into one of the best things ever, because it reinforced in me that no, I can go out here and get it. I can make money off of my art. I can do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I never seen that much money from music in such a short period of time.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so then that got my wheels spinning, and I started thinking about other revenue streams. And that $60,000 debt, I ended up just listening to Dave Ramsey, was bold, called him and was like, hey, like, I got $1,000 for you guys. You know what I'm saying? And they were like, what? And I was like, yep, I got $1,000 for you. You know what I'm saying?
Word.
And take it or leave it. You know what I'm saying? And they took it. And so I settled the $60,000 debt for $1,000 that I thought I was going to have to file for bankruptcy. So I say all that to say, so now imagine being a creative, an entrepreneur, and then you experience something like that, right? And you're like, I could do anything.
Right.
You really then start believing that you can do anything.
Legit,
and that is what happened, bro. Is like that set me on a course to believe I can make more money, to believe I can quit my job, to believe I can find other revenue streams, right? And I wish I would have learned some of this before I was married. But man, sometimes life is the best teacher. You know what I'm saying? You just gotta jump in.
Go through
you know
it.
what I'm saying?
So no, that's real.
So to answer your question, 2 people aren't on board, right? And what I had pushed back to you is I said, is that person not on board with what it looks like your calling in life is, or is that person not on board with you kind of being irresponsible, coming and going as you please, not having to pay attention to the numbers, and treating your career as more of a hobby and less as a career?
No,
you know what I'm
real.
saying? And I was like, that's the deeper question, because if you believe God's called you to do music and to travel and to, you know, whatever, to travel to some degree and to be an entrepreneur, right? And that person's not with that. That's different than that person saying, hey, you might want to get a part-time job so that you could have more stable income.
Type stuff.
Or, hey, are you sure you could only make X amount because this person over here is making this much? You know what I'm saying? And that's when I was like, yo, look, bro, I have half the subscribers you do, and this is what I make. And I started kind of flexing a little bit. You know what I'm saying? And I started showing you some numbers. Like, here's some real numbers of some real money that you could be making because you're independent, you own your masters, you have an audience that cares about you and your depth, and you could actually go out here and make a comfortable living. You could clear 6 figures, you know what I'm saying? Pay taxes on that and still take home, you know, 50, 60, 70,000 a year and live wherever you want and enjoy the life you want to enjoy and be able to give to your church and save and have a baby and all these things, right? And sometimes I think we just don't believe that because we don't have anybody around that can show us. And praise God for guys like Sho Baraka and DJ Official and Lecrae, who early on I saw them getting it. And they weren't rich at the time, 2008, 2009. Reach was just beginning, but they were getting it. And I was like, yo, like, they're not more brilliant or more talented than me or work harder than me. They're people just like I am. If they can do it, I can do something. You know what I mean? And so man, so I think for me, that would be the question to you, would be like, is it about your purpose and your calling, or is it about you wanting to kind of put it in autopilot and cruise a little bit Even though if you paid attention a bit more, if you maybe started a Patreon, if you maybe started doing Facebook ads for your Lord's Child merch, if you maybe started putting your music on Artlist or MusicBed and doing more collaborations and putting out more music, that you could actually make a living to support your wife and eventually a family.
True, yeah. Well, hypothetically, let's just insert that in there. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely gonna say that I'm immature in a lot of areas. I realize that about myself.
I love the vulnerability. I gave you a lot of vulnerability. I appreciate you giving me vulnerability back. In this
it's real, man. Because at the end of the day, like, a woman wants to feel safe, and she wants to feel like there's some type of stability there. And yeah, for me right now, like, I'm kind of wild. So I'm like, yeah, I can be broke. I don't care. Like, I just want to follow God. Like, that's like not, like, only lasts so long.
Yeah.
And then on the other end with that, there's no, like, I hate, in some aspects I really do hate responsibility, because it's just like even working a job, I didn't really like that, because it's like, you have to show up every day at this time, and you have to, you can't just be like, yeah, dog,
yeah,
I'm not showing up this week.
Yeah.
Like, there's just, there's that responsibility, and that's something that I'm asking God to like really help me with.
Yeah. Amen.
So I know that, like,
yeah,
in my circumstance, and this is like pretty obvious that it's for me, but that I do have some issues where I'm just like, I need to pay more attention. I need to, just become a man in certain areas. And that's what I've been like really focusing on these past, ever since I turned 21, really, is where I really felt like I got this smack in the face from God. Like, yo, all right, now it's time to grow up. Like 18, I got like a little push, but then 21, I was like, all right, now it's time to grow up. I just turned 22 last month, and I released a little Instagram snippet called 22. And basically the whole thing of it was just the things that I've been going through as 22, and just kind of feeling this pressure a bit too, because now it's like my parents are like, okay, Montell, we see that music's doing good, like, you're gifted, you're blessed and everything, but what do you do from here? Like, what do you do now? And then my dad's like, you need to have like a vision and a goal and something you're working towards. And for me, I don't. I'm just like, nah, man, I'm just gonna go for it. Like, God's gonna provide. Amen. Like, I just like that, just that wildness, but there is like godliness in setting a vision and a goal. Yeah. So
can I go ahead? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was
gonna say, can I read you some terrifying verses that slap me into place?
Oh my gosh, okay.
This is like, these are the verses that like instilled the fear of God in me. I've told you about the first one.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go.
So Proverbs 12:11.
12:11.
And something I would do if I were you, and for anybody really, like, I've just always read a chapter of Proverbs a day, pretty much my entire life as a Christian. Whatever the date is.
Bubbly flex.
Yeah, bubbly flex. Whatever the date is, I'll read that chapter, right? There's 31 Proverbs, there's 31 chapters. There's usually 30 to 31 days in a month. So I just read whatever the date is. Proverbs 12:11. So this is the verse. I'd read this verse a ton of times, but then I heard a segment on Dave Ramsey shows, and this was the verse of the day. It says, those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. Right? And then New Living Translation says, a hard worker has plenty of food, but a person who chases fantasy has no sense. ESV says, whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense. So that was the first one that was like, man, is this a worthy pursuit? You know what I'm saying? And then 1 Timothy 5:8. This is the one that is horrifying. 1 Timothy 5:8, it says, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
That is, sheesh.
Right? New Living Translation says, but those who won't care for their relatives, especially those in their own household, have denied the true faith. Such people are worse than non-believers.
Oh my gosh.
This is where, like, the whole, to me, people get weird about money. They get weird about, like, poverty versus prosperity gospel. I'm going to make a whole separate video about this. But, man, that's pretty evident. Like, that's a pretty clear verse. Like,
real.
You are, not only are you supposed to have enough to care for your relatives, right?
Yeah.
Which is like I'm not trying to care for my in-laws. And, you know what I'm saying? Like, but not only am I supposed to care for my relatives, I'm also supposed to care for my household, especially my own household. And if I don't, I'm worse than a non-believer. That I shouldn't even carry the banner of Christian over my life.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Sheesh. Yeah.
And so those are the kind of verses that I would read. And, you know, we talk a lot about the fear of God and shout out Jerry Lorenzo, you know, with the Fear of God brand.
Yeah,
and that's something that, like, we know about, but, like, I had to come to a place of just having a reverence for God of, like, bro, like, you gave me a able body, you gave me a sound mind, you gave me talent, time, treasure, the ability to build wealth in this North American context, where, praise God, we aren't being persecuted so that we should remain single because we don't want to bring children and then get martyred, right? Like, that is not our context. We live in a context, as flawed as America is at times, we can worship Jesus freely, we can go to church, we can love our wives, we can, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful time that we live in. And so for me, I feel a moral obligation to not just make enough money to provide for me and my wife and my son, but to also provide enough so that I can take care of my family and friends if they're in trouble. If somebody hits me up and they want to borrow money, I don't lend anybody money, but if I have it, I'll just give it to you. You know what I'm saying? Hey, man, I need X amount. And this happens semi-regularly. People hit me up, yo, man, can I borrow some money? I'm not lending you money. What do you need? Here it is. I don't want it back. Don't give it back to me. You know what I'm saying? And I don't believe in debt. I don't believe in loaning people money. And so, and then it comes full circle to me in Matthew 25, where it talks about the parable of the talents, which people read that verse and they don't know that talents actually means like a day, like I think a year's wages is what it came out to. So at that time, the one who had 5 talents, they said that was equivalent of like in the $300,000 range. You know what I'm saying? So here's this parable of this dude getting 300,000, this dude getting 200,000, this dude getting 100,000. You know what I'm saying? Like,
bank.
And yes, it's a spiritual parable with a spiritual meaning, but the parable right after that is about Jesus says, when I was poor, you fed me. When I was in prison, you came and visited me. When I was in this spot, you took care of me. Right? To do all those things, you have to have resources. You can't feed somebody if you don't first have enough to feed your family and more, abundance. You can't clothe somebody if you don't have enough clothes and abundance. You can't visit somebody in prison if you don't have the ability to step away from your job and your responsibilities and what you're doing at the time to go visit somebody in prison. Right? I don't know if you've ever visited somebody in prison, but it's not something like it's like a day. Like you got to do a whole day. Right? And so and then he goes on to say, what you have done to the least of these, you have done unto me. That sounds like that requires resource. That sounds like that requires diligence, the finances, a plan, a vision. So again, not just have money so I can hoard it, but have money so I can have an open hand mentality and be a blessing to people.
No, that's real.
I don't talk about this stuff because I don't want it to be like a flex, like look at me, or I'm just like, you know what I'm saying? I'm generous. Like that just sounds so silly. But I think in the context of this conversation, it's very important for people to know that one,
money is important,
money's important, and there's a lot of it out there. Like there's a lot of money to be made right now. You know that there's a passage, I think Ephesians 5, where it says seizing the time. You know what I mean? Seizing the times, and it's talking about ministering, but I think it could be applied to like, like I just can't see Paul and Peter and the disciples waking up in 2019, 2020, the opportunities we have, and them just being like, nah, son, suffer for the gospel and be poor. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, they suffered for the gospel, so we wouldn't have to suffer as bad for the gospel. And the way we suffer is we suffer in having to be diligent and to be disciplined and to wake up and force ourselves to do things we don't like to do and be uncomfortable. And so,
that's real.
Yeah, man. I know that was a whole lot I just threw on you.
No, a lot of good wisdom in
that. I think there's a lot of people that are going to hear this. So I think one of your questions was like, when is too young? Right.
Like when is the right time, man?
When is the right time? And for me, I was 23. I was probably too young.
Wow.
But like I said, life is a great teacher, man. And I'm so grateful that I got married at 23. My wife was 21. Man. You know what I'm saying?
Now, are you saying 23 is too young because of the mental state that you were in, or literally, people say you don't know your hormones and like the way that you're not even fully mature until you're 25 as a man? So some people, it's like, is it just the way you think? Was it the financial stability that you weren't in? Or
that's a great question. It was primarily my view of responsibility and finances and like a vision, life vision. Like I knew I was going to do music. I didn't know I was an entrepreneur yet. Even though my dad was an entrepreneur, I didn't know that. So I would say primarily financially, but like Zach Sparazzo just got married. Zach Sparazzo's 21. His wife, Melissa, is 20 or 21. Wow, yeah. So they're relatively speaking young. A lot of pressure from their parents. You're too young. You finish college. You do this. Definitely. And it's like at the end of the day, all those things are valid. Like all those things are valid. But my position would be like, if you know yourself, and you know that the values you hold at 22, 23, 24, this is who you are. Meaning that like, I was certain on Jesus. I was certain on Jesus. I was certain that I wasn't going to work for somebody else my entire life. I was certain on the things that I viewed as close-handed doctrines, the resurrection, right? Like those things. Like I arrived at a place where there was the foundational core fabric of who I was as a person was set. The cement was set. Yeah. And I'm flexible on other things, right? And growing in sanctification, all that kind of stuff. But like I wasn't one of those people that was like unsure about my faith or unsure about the idea of monogamy and being married for the rest of my life or unsure about having kids. Like I knew these things, and those are the most important things. Or like, or I'll even go deeper.
Those things can't really change.
Those things, if you know Jesus, those things shouldn't change. Yeah. If you truly know Jesus, they say the three most important things is faith when it comes to marriage, faith, finances, children. How are you going to raise your children? Are they going to get spanked? Are they not going to get spanked? You know, and in-laws. Where are you going to spend the holidays? So those four things are the most important things. And if you can get through and have a position on those four things, and so I knew. In the sense of in-laws, I knew that my wife, because I had good discipleship, my wife came before anybody. That was not up for debate. There was nobody was going to tell me anything otherwise. I knew that when I became a husband, my wife was my number one priority. Some people don't believe that. Some people don't know that. Some people, they go and do silly things, like when they have an argument with their spouse, they go vent to their parents. I knew that you did not do that. You don't ever vent to your parents about whatever issues you're having in your relationship. You never do that. Because you're married, you're going to work through your issue. But your parents, now their view of your spouse is going to change. And now that's going to, right? So like I had really good discipleship, and I knew at the end of the day, my wife was first. My in-laws did not get to tell me what we did with our lives or how we were going to raise our kids. They didn't get to tell us where we lived or how we spent our money. We had healthy boundaries with our in-laws. We knew we wanted to have kids. A lot of people get married, they don't know if they want kids, they don't know if they want more kids, right? That's a heavy. And we knew we believed in Jesus. We knew we believed in Jesus, and we had some minor theological differences here and there, but not even that big. But we knew that no matter what, Jesus was our core, right? And eventually at some point we would love for me to be the breadwinner, my wife to stay at home with kids. That was another thing we talked about. So like those conversations can be had at 19, 20, 21.
Yeah, those things should be being talked about so you can figure out if this person is compatible, is what you're saying?
Yes, those things should be talked about. And the issue becomes, this is a very macro issue, is society has created this like additional phase of life where you used to go from being a child to becoming an adult, right? And in Jewish culture, I mean, I think they were like, I don't know, 13, 14, they were like, they were man, right?
Young,
yeah. And in our society, we've added this added layer of adolescence. And adolescence is not biblical. And adolescence is 18. When I was your age, it was 18 to 23, 18 to 24. Now adolescence is 18 to 30. You know what I'm saying? So you can kind of screw around until you're in your 30s, and you don't really. The issue with adolescence is those habits and who you are, and if you're a guy that like is into just breaking girls' hearts or leading a girl on, or you're a guy that's sexually immoral, right? You're Christian, but you're sexually immoral. You're sleeping around. You're having sex, or you're a guy who just fill in a blank, right? You just lack integrity. You lack character. That doesn't just stop at some point.
Yeah, right.
And that becomes tougher to stop when you're in your 30s.
Wow.
And so like we know, I'm assuming both of us do, and there's stuff in the public eye that's happening right now. I'm not going to touch on it directly, of guys that are in their 30s, Christians, who are out here and some stuff's coming out, and it's not cool.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like, well, why? Well, it's probably because they didn't check that stuff when they were 22, 23, 24.
Man,
you know what I'm saying? They were willy-nilly. Now you got guys, Christian dudes, sexting. You know what I'm saying? Sending nudes.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, yo, you don't just wake up and stop that. Like the circuitry of your brain is being set in a way, and your character and your integrity is being set in a way where that cement is gonna melt, and you're gonna be who you're gonna be. 27, 28, 30 years old, you're gonna be who you're gonna be.
It's still gonna be there.
And it's gonna be really hard for you to change. And then it's gonna be on some like, you're gonna mess around, have a baby with somebody you don't want to have a baby with. You're gonna mess around, catch something you don't want to catch. You know what I mean? And so I think it's like, yo, adolescence is a myth. It's not real. You know what I mean? It's just, it's worldly. I hate using that word, but it's worldly. Like it's straight man-made, like mumbo jumbo to keep kids, in my opinion.
Keep kids still kind of kids. In
kids.
A sense.
Yeah, man. And then you got the whole like kids then go on to college. Not every kid should go to college. I think education is great, but not every kid should go to college. But then they get into debt.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then you wake up and you're 25, you got $60,000, $70,000 in debt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how do you figure it? It's tough, man.
It's a lot, yeah. No, that's real, man. Yeah, for sure. That's so deep. There's a lot of like good wisdom. So I'm just like, I told him before this started, I was like, you are the teacher, I'm the student. Like you're watching Montell Fish be humbled online on YouTube.
So let me ask you this, like, having engaged with your friends, and you're around more young people than I am around, do you see this myth and this lie of adolescence being embraced?
Okay, well, most of my friends are creative. Most of my friends are okay in their finances. They're not like balling, most of them. And so, in the way that they perceive marriage, they want to get married between like, now and probably 30. So I do think there's this adolescence thing that's not that we don't have this urgency to be like, let's do it now, because we're creatives and we're like, nah, let's focus on this first maybe. But I think we're all still working towards something. So it's not just a what's the word? It's not just this like free flowing thing where we're just kind of like, we'll see what happens. There might be a little bit of that just because it's just the youthfulness, but I think most of us are like, we're in this age between like where we should be making decisions and going hard on things. So I don't know. I guess you could say there is a little bit of that, but maybe not 100%.
Yeah.
You feel me?
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily speaking to like to young Christian people who love Jesus. I'm speaking more of a macro sense. You know
yeah, just in our generation. Oh, for sure. I mean, in young black males, I mean, it's everywhere. And then it's like we just have young black men that like don't really do much. They sit around and just play 2K all day, and they don't really have like a plan or a desire to move forth. And like my pastor said, like he was like, only thing we have to show that, prove that we're men is that we're leaving babies around with a bunch of different things to give us this sense of like, oh, I'm a man, I'm a father, and like it fulfills some part of them, but they know that it's not. They know that there's more, but just having that baby, it kind of can fulfill some type of like, I'm a man or something like that. So
that's heavy.
But it's definitely like in the people that don't know the Lord, and even just when I was going to high school and going to I did a semester in college, you can definitely just feel that. And there's just, and in working jobs and stuff, like you can just feel that it's like the climate of this world and what Satan's doing is trying to keep men boys. And if he can get them to be boys, the girls, well, this could be controversial, but the girls could turn, girls are not going to want the men. They're going to turn to girls. That's controversial, of course, but, and then it's just like, if men are supposed to be the leader as well, and you get the leader, like everything else is gonna crumble collapse after that. So,
whew, dang, that's heavy, bro. That's heavy. You went real deep, man.
Bro, I still got that protein shake taste in my mouth. Oh my gosh.
Montell Fish had a protein shake today, guys. Here's I think something that is hard to compute. When I had more time, I did not have the external motivators of a wife and a son. But I had all the time in the world.
Yeah.
And then when I got the external motivators, I had less time.
That's so interesting.
You know what I mean? And so I think it's super wild how that we can have, you know, a lot of time on our hands and not really have that drive.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's real, man.
To do it. And I think
you would think it would be the opposite.
You would think it would be the opposite. And that's like, I think a lot of what I'm trying to communicate and instill through this channel or whatever is like, hey, like you can, like if you can think as if you are already married and there is a family depending on you when you're younger, then you can make decisions to build revenue streams, a career, a business type stuff, and that later you end up having the freedom to not have to work a job and pursue your hustle and be a husband and be a father. A lot of people are in that spot. That's a tough spot to be in.
For sure.
You know, because if you're an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur. At some point, even if you know how to work a job, at some point you're just not going to be able to.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You're just not going to be able to function, you know? And so, and shout out to all the people that like got like regular 9-to-5s and got regular jobs to provide for your families. Like that's very noble. But you know how tough that can be. Y'all know how hard that can be. You know what I'm saying? To be someone that's wired a certain way and you have to be submitted to someone else's schedule for you and all that kind of stuff.
Legit.
But if you can catch that window when there's like, yo, there's a lot of time. I have a lot of time. And maybe you're just dating. Maybe you are married, but you don't have kids yet. You're going to wait to have kids for a few years. And you have that window of time. And I feel like now with stuff like this channel, Brandman Sean, there's so many different ways to understand how revenue streams work with art that you can build something and build some infrastructure so that when you do have the kid, you have more liberty and freedom to maneuver how you want to maneuver, and it's less of a burden. You know what I mean?
So what would you say to a person that needs to get that urgency going? Because like we had that talk last night and I was like, yo, I just need to do something. Like I need to just get off my butt. And I think just mentors like is a big thing, and just having people that will speak that into your life. But is there anything else that you would say like that if someone's watching this and they're like, and they're just like this nonchalant kind of feeling, like what would you say to that person?
I would say, as a quote, it's partly inspired by David Goggins, but I say choose your suffering before your suffering chooses you. So choose to suffer in ways that is uncomfortable now, because later you don't know what is going to choose you to suffer, how you're going to suffer later. Right? So like choose to suffer in the moment, whatever that thing you need to do to suffer now, whether it's waking up early, whether that's learning profit margins so you can know what this hoodie sells for and how to, you know what I mean? How to the right price point, like whatever that, and how many do you need to sell to make X amount? You know what I'm saying? Like figure out what that stuff is. And I'm not saying you need to be an Excel wizard, or I'm not saying you need to be a math wizard. I'm saying like figure out that stuff though and be willing to suffer through it, because later you won't have the choice. Later somebody else will have that choice, or life will spurt circumstances on you, you know? And so for me, and I've told you this, like I got DJ Michael is going to come and stay with me for a month in January. You know what I'm saying? And that's his way of like, hey man, I want to work on these areas. And I'm like, just come to California and just live with me. You know what I'm saying? And you're
gonna have a whole camp here pretty soon.
Yeah, and I would love that. And that's why like that master bedroom upstairs, I'm keeping that open. Like I'm not gonna have a roommate in there, is because I want to be in a position to serve people in that way.
That's dope.
Because if I can help inspire a generation of creative entrepreneurs who, you know, they're under 25, they aren't married, they have the time. fitness is such a great metaphor. You know what I'm saying? Fitness is such a great metaphor for entrepreneurship, for life in general. Like suffer through beating your body up.
True,
You know what I'm saying? And eating things you're not accustomed to eating, and trying to avoid things you are. It's such a great metaphor for life, or basketball. Such a great metaphor for teamwork. You know what I mean? Like I feel like who you are in the context of teams is who you really are on the basketball court. If you can play basketball, you know what I'm saying? Like the person who is an only child who doesn't do well in teams never passes the ball.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
no,
and I used to be me. I'm an only child. You know what I'm saying? My mom's only child. And
That's
so,
funny.
so I would say, like, can you intentionally put yourself in circumstances where you can suffer? You know, and if you can, then suffering will become easier, and then before you know it, you will enjoy it, and then before you know it, you'll feel sick without it.
Wow,
You know what I mean?
deep. That's
like
deep.
I go to New York, and I can wake up when I want. I can go to sleep when I want. I just got back, right? I can wake up when I want, go to sleep when I want, eat what I want. No one's paying attention. It's just me. Foggy was there with me for a couple days.
Right.
And bro, I hated it. Like I hated having my time off. I hated not waking up and driving straight to the gym.
Wow.
I hated not being able to eat what I want to eat and cook my own food.
Wow.
I hated it. And so it's one of those things where you discipline yourself, and then like the only thing I'm thinking about is like, God, I just want to get back home so I can get back into my routine of being up by 6 and being to the gym by 6:30 and
deep,
eating my oatmeal and my eggs and my kale. You know what I'm saying? like you just end up loving the things you hate. You know what I mean? It just takes time.
Yeah.
You know?
And it takes that you're just getting used to it, yeah? And then once you just get in that flow, when you get out of that flow, it feels weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's
the flow state. It's like that flow state. Like how can you find the flow state for the optimal deliverance of the person you want to become? You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of you guys are there in terms of your zeal for Jesus and your heart for Jesus, but then it's like the rest of it. You know what I mean? How does that touch everything else? You know?
No, that's real.
For me, getting married was great. You know what I'm saying? It was that thing that snapped me into place and grew me up. And within a couple years, I was making more money and doing great. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And then a couple years after that, I was married. And that is what I needed. I don't think there's anything wrong with someone figuring that out. What I don't want to see happen is the people who really love Jesus push out being married more and more. And then they wake up, they're 35, they don't have kids yet, then they're trying to have kids, and then a generation does this of like, I'm gonna spend my 20s being an entrepreneur, right? And say best case scenario, they don't struggle with porn, they're not sexually promiscuous, they're like crushing it, right? And this is we know this is a very small percentage of people in their 20s that are like, yeah, man, God's got me. I'm not sexting with anybody. I'm not sending nudes. I'm not sleeping around. I'm not looking at porn. Let's just say best case scenario. Then they crush it in their 20s. They build a career they want to have. They wake up at 30. They're making 6 figures, and then they're like, now I'm gonna pursue marriage. And then they get married, and then they're like, yeah, but we want to have a couple years to ourselves. And then finally they're 35, 36, 37, and then they try to have their first kid.
And then it's like mad late.
And then it's late, and then you run into some health complications potentially. And you know what I mean? It becomes harder, right? That's what I would hate to see this generation do. Is best case scenario, you aren't burning with lust and you can crush it in your 20s and be sexually pure. Like if you could do that, kudos to you guys. You know what I'm saying? And then, but you get there and you're 35. And now what's happening is now from a cultural standpoint, we aren't reproducing, and Christians aren't taking the land. We aren't being the majority. I mean, we're not the majority now. Like Bible-believing, Holy Spirit-filled Christians are not the majority now, right? So imagine a couple generations in the future, all the Christians who should have had kids, right? Who should have been loving Jesus and having kids and pursuing their careers, aren't. And what does the world look like in 30, 40 years? You know what I'm saying? When our lineage, you know what I mean, dies off because we didn't have kids.
Dang.
You know?
Yeah, that's real. That's deep, man. Sheesh.
Yeah, man.
This was a good convo.
This is stuff I be thinking about, bro.
This is fire. Dang. Well, hopefully you guys benefited from our suffering, our talking about touchy things.
Yeah.
And yeah, now go be fruitful, multiply.
Yo, thank you guys for watching this. Make sure you guys are subscribed to Montell Fish's channel, following him on Instagram, all that kind of stuff. You guys want to hear more conversations like this? Let me know, man. Some of this stuff is very personal. I don't really talk a whole lot about like marriage and entrepreneurship and when and how and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like it's important. So let me know. Peace.